Hello everybody and welcome to the Tuesday edition of Video Clips. I hope you all had a wonderful 4th of July holiday and you remembered my reminder to not eat anything that I would not eat. Of course you did, right? All right, just a couple of quick announcements. Tomorrow, July 9th, we're posting on our website a fabulous interview with Kim Richards, the author of Passing the Pregnancy Test. And it's a book about infertility and how she used diet to overcome infertility. Lots of wonderful information in there for women who are, even if you're not suffering from infertility, you ought to read this book because it really shows how important diet is. So anyway, the interview is terrific. She's so easy to talk to, great communicator. I think you'll get really inspired when you hear her story. And then on July 15th, next week, is the next Open Forum Ask Dr. Pam session. And if you're interested in those things, call our office at 614-841-7700. All right, today we're going to talk about nutritional confusion from a couple of different standpoints. The first one we're going to talk about is the way that diets have changed and how that has impacted particularly the weight status of people in this country. And we have a lot of nutritional experts, if we want to call them that, who continue to insist that the reason why Americans are getting fatter is high fructose corn syrup and carbohydrates and starch. And these are the folks that are out there telling people, eat more fat. The secret to being thin is to eat more fat. Well, I mean, I know people like to hear good news about their bad habits, but I think most people hearing that statement, at least the ones that hear this broadcast, know that that's just really not true. So I'm going to talk about some recent research that comes from the USDA, which, by the way, tracks the availability of various foods and nutrients in the food supply. And this has been correlated to correspond with consumption patterns because, of course, the food supply responds to what people want to eat. For the period between 1970 and 2009, here are the things that changed and how much they changed. First of all, total energy availability. What that means is calories in the food supply increased by 10.7%. There was a 0% increase in the availability of fructose. High fructose corn syrup increased by 1.3%, and carbohydrate availability increased by 129 calories a day, which equated to 9.8% increase. On the other hand, dietary fats and oils increased by 14.6%. So, while Americans were getting heavier, fat and oils in the diet going up at the same time. So, when we look at that, it's kind of difficult to attribute our current weight problems to carbohydrate, fructose, and high fructose corn syrup. In fact, the researchers state, quote, "The present findings also cast doubt on the purported role of high fructose corn syrup as a single important dietary factor in promoting obesity." And let me say this for the record. I'm not a fan of high fructose corn syrup, but the problem is that we're always looking for nutritional villains and heroes, and there's a tendency to try to simplify everything. And so what people are doing is looking for the single thing that if you changed it in the diet, it would make a big difference, and we're just not going to find that. I mean, high fructose corn syrup, if you took it all out of the food supply tomorrow and nothing else changed, we wouldn't see people's weight changing so much either. The researchers also stated that the availability of fats and oils showed a sharp increase starting in 1999, and they actually attributed this to the increasing popularity of lower carb and higher fat diets at that time. The incidence of obesity during this period of time increased from 13% of the population to over 34%. So apparently, contrary to what a lot of the experts tell us, the increase in high-fat eating not resulting in a decrease in the incidence of overweight and obesity in our country. I'm not surprised at that, and this isn't the only study that shows it, but I'm going to keep talking about this stuff as long as there are people out there trying to tell people that they should start eating more fat and consuming less carbohydrate. It's just not true. So while we're on the subject, I mean, that's all confusing for most people. They hear all these confusing messages from people. It's very frustrating for people who want to eat well. So, and it's confounded by this idea that people want to hear good news about their bad habits. And they will even ignore credible information in the quest to hear good news about their bad habits. And the study I'm going to talk about now clearly shows that. This study was designed to evaluate how a group of consumers would respond to messages about food and health when they were in conflict with one another. And the way they structured this study was a little bit complicated, and I hope I can explain it to you, but it was actually quite interesting. They took 803 adults, and they gave those adults information from a national food safety agency that was credible, showing the health risks associated with eating red meat. They were then shown a second message that originated with a food safety agency, but this message was delivered by a third party, and the third party who delivered the message varied. For the second message, half of the participants were given confirmation that eating red meat, not such a good idea. The other half were told that red meat was actually good for health and they should be encouraged to eat more of it. In both cases, again, there was an online author deemed, they varied who delivered the message. And half of the messages were delivered via an anonymous online author who was deemed a low-trust communicator, while the other half were delivered from a National Doctors Association, and this was deemed a high-trust communicator. The participants were then asked about how credible, accurate, and believable the messages were. And here's what's very interesting. The people who were told that red meat was actually good for you and you should eat more of it, they deemed that message credible and believable, even when it came from the low-trust communicator, the anonymous person writing about this issue. And that's, remember, the first message about being careful about red meat came from a high-trust communicator. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that people want to hear good news about their bad habits, and even when that news comes from a not credible source, they're willing to listen to it because it's what they like to hear. So I think what we have to do is make sure that we keep talking about the truth until it gets through to people that, you may like hearing this message that it's okay to eat whatever you want, but it's actually not true. Lead researcher Ayn Reagan stated, quote, "Conflicting messages become particularly problematic when there's a failure to report the necessary detail of the science underpinning a risk or benefit message, as it may impair the reader's ability to make sense of the information." And that's really true, because if you take a look at this situation, really what people were told is don't eat red meat, and then they were told a second time it's okay or it's not okay. But nobody talked to these people about the science of what happens when you eat a high animal foods diet. And I'm often told, and Dr. Campbell and I actually have talked about this on a couple of different occasions, that Pam, you think people want to hear about all this science and they're interested in all this detail? Actually, I think they do. And I think that's evidenced by the popularity of Dr. Campbell's book. He sold 1 million copies of the China study. The popularity of my book, Food Over Medicine. It was #1 on Amazon for a period of time. And the number of people that are taking our programs and signing up for classes here, I think people actually really do want to know. And I think we have to stop thinking of the public as a bunch of hapless people who don't care about their health or care about themselves. They do care and they want this information. And that's why we've always taken the approach here at the Wellness Forum to educate people so that they can sort through this stuff and really determine what the truth is, even when we're not around to do it for them. So anyway, educated people take better control of their health, and with all of the awful information that circulates and the conflicting information that comes out every day, I think we have to work really hard to continue to put our message out there, which is, don't just believe what I say, come and learn what I have to show you and then believe what you think about it at the end. That's a much better system for helping people to make the right decisions. Okay, that's all for today. As usual, pass this on to anybody who you think might enjoy watching it, and I will be back to you on Thursday with more news.